Full time. West Ham 3, Arsenal 1. Arsenal crash out of the Carabao Cup. And they do so in pretty disappointing fashion. Of course, all losses in a cup competition are disappointing one way or another, but the manner in which they failed to turn up, particularly in the second half of the match, was a little concerning, a little bit emblematic of some issues that Arsenal have had throughout the season. And while this match can kind of mentally be put in the bin to an extent, it really does just remind us that there are some issues that need to be sorted out with this team. But I don't really want to spend too much time talking about the general result, right? So let's just dive into the winners and losers. We're going to do 2 winners, like 4.5 losers today. There's just a lot of disappointing performances that I think need to be highlighted. But we'll start with the good ones. Winner number 1, I think, is Reiss Nelson. And I think he showed today, not that many of us needed convincing, but he showed today that he can operate pretty effectively and reliably on the right wing. Despite the fact that this was a Carabao Cup match, we played against a full-strength West Ham side, essentially, away at their ground. So, pretty high-level opposition for Nelson to be playing against and, demonstrating his capabilities at right wing. I think he was direct. I think he was one of the few players on the day who looked like he actually wanted to be in the competition. And he was threatening, created a few chances, and all in all, just was impressive. And again, you can't really say that about that many of the players who featured today for Arsenal. Nelson is a guy that I've felt a little sorry for over the course of the last, call it season and a half, maybe 2 seasons. And that's because I think the talent's there. As it stands, he's a bit part player for us. And we managed to convince him to stay at the club through a contract extension. And it sounds like he's getting compensated pretty well for that decision. But just the lack of game time he's had has been pretty disappointing for a player who I think, offers directness, offers end product, offers, that pace and trickery on the wings that I think we lacked a little bit while Martinelli was gone. So, it's good to see that not only is he an option on the left wing, but he's also an option on the right. And with Saka starting to show the effects of, playing a large amount of minutes for several years now, I think we're going to need guys like Nelson who are able to step into that role. Also, I really liked his defensive work on the day. There were a couple situations in which he tracked back and won the ball off Said Benrahma, I think, very impressively. So all in all, hopefully, this is something you can kick on from. And, I feel bad now that we're out of the Carabao Cup. This probably means his chances are going to be even more limited. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully what Mikel Arteta saw from him today convinces him to use him a little bit more in matches and competitions of a little bit more consequence. The second winner I want to highlight is Jakub Kiwior. And I don't think he was spectacular or anything, but the fact of the matter is no one really was for Arsenal today. And I think Kiwior was, alongside Nelson, probably one of the more impressive players for us today, and a guy who showed that he deserves more minutes than he's probably going to get this season. And that's not to say that, the guys ahead of him don't deserve the minutes they're getting, but you just feel bad that a guy like Kiwior, who a lot of top clubs were looking at when we signed him, came over and is, again, a depth piece for us. But he came in and effectively played that right center back role that he played for us at the close of last season. Still wish that he'd played that role a little bit earlier, maybe we'd be sitting here with a Premier League title to our names. Yeah, he looked pretty good. He won about half his duels, which you'd want him to do a little bit better than, but he looked more composed than Gabriel on the day. And Gabriel had some disappointing giveaways pretty high up the pitch that Kivior dealt with pretty well. Obviously, Arsenal conceded 3 goals on the day, but all in all, I think Kivior coped with the pace and the physicality of the game a lot more than other Arsenal players did. And I think he was also pretty good on the ball, and he got, I want to say it's either high 80s or like low to mid 90s in terms of the number of touches. So he was very involved in our build-up, very trusted with playing the ball out of the back. And yeah, all in all, I think he was a player who pulled Arsenal more in a positive direction than perhaps the rest of his teammates on the day. Losers, where to begin? Let's start with someone who didn't play today, which is Emil Smith-Rowe. And I've been talking online about the need for reliability in key players, and I've specifically been zeroing in on the likes of Thomas Partey and Gabriel Jesus for, these repeated instances in which they just continuously get injured and they continue to miss important matches for us. Looks like we're going to be without Gabriel Jesus for a trip to St. James's Park this weekend, which is a blow. And, reports are coming out saying that Partey's going to be out for a few weeks. Jesus is going to be gone until, late November, maybe early December. And you start to wonder about how useful these guys can be, despite their high level of talent. And Smith-Rowe is another guy who's in that conversation. Obviously, he's not as key to the team currently as the other two, but this is a guy who had an opportunity, right? And he played in Arsenal's last game. I was hoping he would play today. Obviously, the news of him suffering a knee injury is a bummer. Mikel Arteta came out after the match and said that he's going to be out for weeks, whatever that means. It's not good news, that's for sure. And, again, like I've said it before, we have a problem with the 8 position. Odegaard doesn't look good. Havertz is not justifying his price tag right now. Vieira is not a two-way player. Trossard, iffy. Declan Rice, sure, he can play left 8, but we want him to play 6, especially because Thomas Partey, who can also play at right 8, is never available. So there was an opening there, especially at that left 8 position, for Smith-Rowe to stake a claim. And he's been, really burdened by these continuous and constant injury issues over the last couple seasons. And after that operation, that procedure he had, I believe it was on, kind of his hip groin area, you'd hoped that he would kick on from there and maintain some consistent fitness. And he's failed to do that as soon as he started breaking into the first team. It just feels like Smith-Rowe is increasingly not in that conversation anymore, right? For these players who look really promising young, but injuries continue to hamper them, it's not very often that they're able to overcome that. And you just feel like Smith-Rowe's window is closing and closing and closing. And yeah, if he misses a few weeks and then he comes back, who knows what's happened by then? Maybe Havertz has finally put it together. Maybe Vieira has become usable. Maybe Thomas Partey comes back from injury and allows Declan Rice to play at the left 8 position. We don't really worry about it for a while. Things change really quickly in this sport. So if you are consistently out of action, you get left behind really quickly. So next up is, I don't know whether to do Alexander Zinchenko or to do the Zinchenko-Jorginho pivot. I think I'll go with the pivot because I think they're both still very useful, experienced highly talented and technically gifted players, right? But I was nervous when that lineup came out and Jorginho and Zinchenko were in it together, right? Because what's going to happen, especially with the eights that were deployed, is Jorginho would move over to the right a little bit, Zinchenko would invert, as we've all become accustomed to him seeing, and you'd have a pivot of Jorginho and Zinchenko. And those are two players who you do not really want to rely on in a game against West Ham that's going to involve pace, that's going to involve you getting hit on the break, that's going to require a level of dynamism and athleticism. So for those two to start together, it was concerning, and unfortunately my concerns were borne out, especially because the midfield just felt so open at times when West Ham broke on us, and Jorginho wasn't able to get back in time. Zinchenko has never been a good transition defender, and again, that the left side of our defense was left open, and that's where a lot of the damage came from. In particular, I'm thinking of Mohamed Kudus's really nice, touch to bring the ball down, and then second touch to slam the ball past Ramsdale to make it 2-0. Yeah, it was just, I don't want to play those two players together, and I think it's really telling that Zinchenko was the first substitution made, and he was replaced with Tomiyasu, a guy who did not start today, a guy who, personally, I think these are the conditions in which you'd want to start him. That tells me that Arteta didn't want to play Tomiyasu today, and that tells me that Tomiyasu is probably looked at least as a starter for Newcastle. But quite frankly, I think Tomiyasu is very quickly making case to be the starting left back, right? I think he can do the inversion part of that job pretty well at this point. Obviously Zinchenko is world class at that aspect of the game, but I think Tomiyasu can come in and do it to a very usable level. I think he's better on the ball than a lot of people give him credit for. Again, not this master string puller that Zinchenko is, but I think he's decent enough. And you're going to lose a little bit in the progressive passing. You're going to lose a little bit in the progressive carrying. You're not going to have a guy who can, again, pull the strings and control possession and help dominate games that way. But you're going to have a guy who can decently do it, hopefully be, made up for by the players around him. But on the opposite end, you have probably the best 1v1 defender in the team, on the pitch, on the left-hand side of the field, defending against, some of the most threatening players in the league. I'm talking guys like Mohamed Salah and Jeremy Doku, right? So yeah, I think Tomiyasu is probably the guy who needs to start. And as for Jorginho, again, you can't play Jorginho and Zinchenko together. It's got to be one or the other, in my opinion. And I think for as long as Thomas Partey's out, we're going to need Jorginho, right? You can't give all those minutes to Declan Rice, who, by the way, crossed 1,200 minutes on the season today. And it's November 1st, and Declan Rice has already played 1,200 minutes. So we're using him a lot, and we can't continue to give him 90 after 90 after 90. So Jorginho is going to have to be a guy who plays in certain situations. When that happens, I think you need a guy like Tomiyasu to compensate for that lack of defensive capabilities, especially in transition. Aaron Ramsdale, there's been this whole kerfuffle, right, for the first 2 months of the season about Raya coming in and taking over for Ramsdale, and people saying that Ramsdale deserves to be the starter, people saying that Raya isn't an upgrade over Ramsdale, people saying that it's a disgrace, that it's not fair, that it's ruthless, Arteta's going to lose the dressing room, all this yada, 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 right? But the stats before we got into the situation even said that Raya is a better and more effective shot stopper than Aaron Ramsdale is, does a better job of keeping the ball out of the net, does a better job of preventing shots from turning into goals, but also is a more reliable passer of the ball, particularly long range. But pretty much across the board, a more useful player in ball progression, right? Raya is able to kind of play as that left center back in build up sometimes, the way that Ramsdale almost seems to refuse to do. I get the impression based on some of his comments that he's made in the past and Arteta's very quick willingness to use Raya that Ramsdale's just not doing what Arteta's asking of him. So this was his chance to come in and make a statement and show the world that Raya shouldn't be starting over him so easily. And yeah, the first goal, I don't really blame him for it. Souček was holding him. There was no VAR to overturn it. It was unfair. That goal shouldn't have stood. But I think in build-up, particularly at this one point when West Ham were pressing us really high, Ramsdale looked pretty nervy, gave the ball to Gabriel in a pretty precarious position, and the ball went out for a throw-in. I don't think he particularly covered himself in glory for Jared Bowen's goal. Yes, I know the ball deflected, but he still got a hand to it and let the ball go into the net anyway, almost hit it in himself. So not a good night for Ramsdale. And, especially when it comes to goalkeepers, you don't get many shots to overturn decisions against you with the manager. And yeah, I don't think he did himself any favors today. And I think Raya's a starter moving forward, and I'm not sure Ramsdale can really have any complaints about that. And then loser number 4, I believe we're on now, is Gabriel. I just think he looks shaky tonight. We're used to seeing a guy who's ready for the battle, always up for a competition, always up for a little tussle with the biggest, most physical guy on the pitch opposite him, and just had some moments where on the ball he looked a little nervous, and there were a couple times he lost possession in a pretty uncomfortable position for Arsenal, right? And both times actually it kind of happened near the left touch line, kind of in the upper part of the middle third, where West Ham could just very quickly break onto us and probably force an overload in terms of number of players they had, number of players we had. Luckily, I think Kivior and White were able to deal with it pretty effectively for the most part. But yeah, just not Gabriel's best game. I don't really think it means anything long term for him. I think he'll come back and look like his normal self against Newcastle. And then I could talk about other guys like Vieira and Havertz, and I think Nketiah managed to follow up one of his best performances in an Arsenal shirt with one of his worst performances in an Arsenal shirt. I could talk about all those guys, but I think loser number 4.5 on the night needs to be our opinion of the Carabao Cup. In the aftermath of the match, I saw a lot of people take to social media to talk about how this isn't a big deal, right? Who cares about the Carabao Cup? It's whatever, Mickey Mouse Cup. We've got bigger fish to fry, all that jazz. And to an extent, I understand that, right? Because if we have to go out of a competition, Carabao Cup is the first one I'd pick, right? I think it's, to be quite honest, a very redundant competition. I think the FA Cup basically does everything that you want the Carabao Cup to be and then some, right? But it's a trophy. And when you have Manchester City dominating that in that department and winning trebles and, buying their way to success, and you have Newcastle also getting taken over by a government for all intents and purposes, and you have Manchester United, who it's only a matter of time before they spend, 300-400 million and come up with a team that can do something. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but at some point down the line. And when you have Chelsea dropping £1 billion on, some of the best young talent they could find, that's also eventually going to click. So, and of course, I think Liverpool have successfully completed a rebuild in one transfer window. So when you have all these teams in the mix, every trophy matters. You can't write off trophies. You can't say that, the Carabao Cup doesn't matter. If things were to capsize in terms of our season and we only had the Carabao Cup to show for it and a third or fourth place finish and that's it, I would be disappointed with the outcome of that season. But again, I don't think we're at a point in the story of this team, in this team's progression, where we can just say, that's small time stuff, right? We haven't won anything yet. We won the FA Cup in 2020, but this group of players haven't achieved anything yet. So to write off the Carabao Cup as, just a match that no one cares about, roll out the kids, move on to the next one when we lose, I think it's dismissive of an opportunity to accomplish something from which this team can build on. And, I guess the only silver lining to this is that we have a couple of fewer games to play in January when things start to get really busy. We've got some extra breaks, some extra days of rest that we can give to the players. But I'm still disappointed, especially to go out to West Ham. If you want to lose in the semifinals to Liverpool or Newcastle, that's one thing. But this should have been a winnable game. I think Arteta made some questionable decisions with the lineup. And I think a lot of the players who stepped out onto that pitch in an Arsenal shirt tonight didn't really seem fussed about whether or not they stayed in that competition. And that, for me, is something that I hope Arteta nipped in the bud tonight in the locker room, because at this level, with this kind of competition, an unprecedented level of competition, you don't get to just pick and choose which trophies are more valuable than others. They're all valuable. They're all additions to the trophy cabinet. They're all silverware. They all show up on your Wikipedia page when you click on the honors tab. So hopefully we don't write off other competitions this season in the pursuit of, the big prize. We should try to win every game that we can, and we should try to win it all. That should be the aim. So I think I've babbled on enough, and frankly, I don't want to think about this match anymore. Again, it's not really a big deal, but I just think you can only harp on it for so long. Newcastle at the weekend. Hopefully, this match and some choice words from Arteta serve to motivate the team to come out with a better performance next time. Obviously, Rice will start, Saka will start, Martinelli will start, Odegaard will start, Saliba will start, Raya will start. So, we'll be looking at a pretty, a stronger team than we saw today. But, not the best of nights. So, anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to me, just talk about this game. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. You can follow the channel, the pod, at This Week Arsenal. You can, of course, like, comment, subscribe on this video. We really appreciate it. And we're trying to hit 2,000 subscribers. We're only 90-ish subscribers away from that. So, if you wanted to, subscribe to the channel, we put out a pod every week. I do these videos after every match, working on another video, of a video essay. So yeah, we'd really appreciate it if you joined us on the journey. But until then, take care, stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.